always looking to leverage their biggest asset, their employees, developing individuals and teams to perform better. But sometimes there is a feeling that learning and development hasn't worked and the return on investment isn't there. So why is this? What are the mistakes companies are making? In this episode, we're joined by two highly experienced individuals who I've known and worked with for over 20 years. Both have experience of working for and with a variety of large organisations and are much valued associates of 2Js and very good friends. Mr. John Pilford and Mr. Nick Hindley. Welcome, chaps. How are we doing?
Very well,
Very
thanks.
good. Thank you, Lee. Thanks for the invite.
No, good to have you on board. And I was tempted to change the title of this episode to Three Old Men and a Whinge, but the producers have kind of suggested that I stay with the title that we're gone for, which is, as I say, just looking at why mistakes are happening with large companies when it comes to L&D. I know from our experience and our conversations previously, we've kind of come across many delegates turning up just thinking it's a bit of a tick box exercise, or they've not really been explained what they're there for, and poor evaluation pre and post training courses not really delivering the return on investment for companies. So I just wanted to kind of pick your brains in terms of your experiences and what do you think organizations should do better based on those experiences? Any thoughts, guys?
Well, straight in, I think it's just answering your points as you set out in your intro, that people arrive on their training unsure why they're there, often at very, very short notice because the company's paid for spots, and literally the day before or even on the day, they're then told, right, you're on a training course today, go. What is it? What's it for? How long is it for? No understanding that there may be a qualification and it could give them an advantage. And often then the recall on the there's no feedback from them other than a whinge to the company, and often they'll not get paid the full rate that they on a day rate because they're on a training course, especially if you're in the construction industry courses.
Yeah, and I guess, again, comments coming back that, you know, my email in tray is kind of building up whilst I'm here, that there's no one kind of covering me whilst I'm here, and that kind of lack of support often leads to kind of training courses or L&D interventions being seen as a burden rather than actually a boon in terms of the development.
Yeah, I think if you go back a stage to where does this thing come from, the biggest area, the most significant area in the last 20 years that I've been involved with is getting clients, whether they're in-house directors or consultancy clients, to spend enough time forming the outcomes they want to achieve. Now, all of your training that I've worked with, the training you've supplied me with when I've been in companies, and the training I've worked with on you, is all action based. So what are we asking these people to do when they finish the training? And then we focus on doing that. So we're equipping them with capability, not knowledge. So I'm not knocking knowledge. That's a very important thing. But a lot of courses are just, you know, trying to stuff things into people's heads. That is not good enough in this day and age. Managing people is very complicated. So I think for me, the outcomes is where it starts to go wrong. And one of the frustrations that I've had from clients, and I understand it, I took about a week once to finish formulating some outcomes with some internal clients who wanted a program for project managers to equip them to be directors. That's a big skill shift from managing a project to being a director. So we took a week to formulate the outcomes, to specifically identify what are the things that they need to do as directors they're not doing now. And there was a lot of let's say certainly frustration, and towards the end quite a bit of impatience and a little bit of hostility about, why are we going around this another time? Because we told you at the beginning we want them to be directors. So yeah, okay, but what is it they're going to do in 6 months' time they're not doing now, you know, in order to be good directors? So for me, that's where it starts to go wrong, is people are not prepared to spend enough time formulating what is the outcome we're trying to achieve.
Yeah, I'm often reminded by Covey's book, Seven Habits, where he talks about starting with the end in mind, which is a great concept, particularly when he's looking at training courses and L&D being implemented. So having that clarity as to what are we actually trying to achieve here from the sessions is important. I totally agree with that, Nick. I think also you alluded to the way that you actually deliver the training as well. And I think I still see a lot of other organizations and people that we go into work with talking about the chalk and talk training, where people are just lectured to, almost kind of akin to university style lecturers. And again, as you point out, that has its place, but when you're looking to engage with your employees and your learners, often many who have told or been told just to turn up without that kind of explanation, sitting them down and just being lectured at for a number of hours is immediately going to switch them off. So you're dealing with that kind of mindset and disengagement off the bat straight away if you don't have the right learning style as well.
I think one of the things that I often pick up on, and I think that's something, Lee, I've working with yourself and Nick and other people around, is actually often the businesses we go into, we know very little about what actually they do. So we are kind of have to find out what is it they want their people to do with their other people. So actually that people skill, it's not actually understanding how they move stuff from A to B, whether it's logistics or whether they're building stuff from, digging big holes and building buildings out of it. It's how do they manage the people that are doing that? And often that people skill. So when I speak to companies when I'm doing training, I often say to them, I'm there to, they have the skill set. They know what they do. I need to just bring it out of them in the training sessions of actually what is happening at work and what do they need to happen and how are we going to do it. So we've got all the tools, and without saying it's a training course, like Nick said, it's a chalk and talk and it's bits and pieces. We then enable them to have that skill to go back into the workplace to actually feel confident about making those decisions and getting people to work and actually understanding and that two of these and one of these, using those, what they see, what they hear, before they actually say anything, and actually understanding how that's best. And I think that's one of the things I learned very early on is I don't need to know what you do. I just need to help you as a person get better results from your teams.
Yeah, and again, that kind of, what do they take away from that intervention? What do they take away from that training session and subsequently utilize? I guess from a company's point of view, that's the kind of golden crux, isn't it? That's the return on investment that they are looking for, that people have been through an experience, an L&D experience, and then they're coming back and doing something different. But again, I think that that lack of embedment, that lack of follow-up from the actual organizations, or sometimes training companies as well, means that it's not always embedded as well as it should do. Again, I see a lot of organizations now starting to band around the 70-20-10 principle. But again, the reality of it actually working, certainly some of the organizations I've come across, that they're probably just giving it lip service rather than actually doing it properly.
Yeah, I think the thing John touched on that we all do, and we all do in your programs, is as a trainer, or I prefer facilitator, because training always conjures up like holding fish for dolphins and all that kind of stuff. So facilitating learning as a process, what we all do quite naturally and with your programs all the time is you have to have an idea. It's back to the outcome. You have to have an idea of when is this person when have they achieved the level of confidence? For me, that's the key thing. When have they achieved the level of confidence that when they leave this room and in a week's time this situation crops up, they will actually be confident enough to do the things we've gone through with them. I've never had a problem with any delegate, including high school students, college students, any range of people you like, understanding what we cover. Everyone gets it. That's not the problem. So, as I said before, it's not knowledge. They understand it. They get it. They understand the theories. The thing for me, the hurdle for me, the threshold is, can I get it within the room we're in that time we've got? Can I set up a series of activities that show me you can do that with somebody else on a flip of a coin, because it might happen very suddenly? Am I sure that you are confident enough to do that? And that's something, again, I think you mentioned chalk and talk. There's a lot of training still, sadly, in the training world that is just not up to standard because they're not the benchmark of when they are. I'm assessing people all the time, not formally, but until I'm happy that those people in front of me, I've got the confidence to do what we've covered, I'm not going to leave it. So again, as you said, I think you alluded to this, we may have an agenda of things to cover, but that goes out the window if I need to spend more time with people to get them to the point of doing that thing. I'd rather people learn one thing well and go and do it, because that will change the organization, than cover 15 things that they can reel off in a pub conversation, but they have no idea how to do it in practice. So I mean, for me, that's the core of your stuff that we do. And certainly that's where I'm coming from. The last thing I ever want to do is be asked to retrain people, because that's a big failure. We've just failed to instill the knowledge and skill to be able to do what we want to do.
Well, that's an interesting point you make there, Nick, about retraining people, because again, I've been on many kind of courses where, similar to you guys, probably the opening question we often ask of the audience is, have you done this before, or have you had any experience of the subject matter before? And more often than not, people say, yeah, we did this 6 months ago, we did this a year ago, etc. So it's immediately kind of thinking, well, why are you here doing it again then? And it's often for the reasons you've just kind of mentioned there, that it hasn't either been delivered correctly, or the right intent hasn't been explained, or it's not been followed through, and the measurements for embedment haven't been kind of implemented. So it's an incredible waste of time and money and effort from an organization's point of view to be putting people on the same content of courses every 6 months, every 12 months, etc. And that's a real concern. So I guess organizations, when they're looking in the current economic climate, looking for that return on investment, have to focus more on getting it right first time. So it's not just about the topic, it's the way it's delivered, it's the way it's followed up as well.
And I think, Lee, that one of the things that Nick said, working for 2Js, is you never do a course over a week. It's a couple of days, a month. And the first, as we outline the end of the day, what have we taken from this session? What are you going to try at work? What are you going to do? What are you going to do with this knowledge you've just got, all these skills? And then the first part of the next session, a month later, is how have you used it? What's different? Have you got a better result? How are your teams better? The team meetings going better? Are you getting better understanding? Are you getting better clarity? Are you getting better output? Are you able to get that feedback from your team? Are you engaging and asking for that feedback and actually listening to it and then actioning it? Those are the sort of things that really going to, and like Nick said, if you may have a topic that day and you may go off a little bit because actually the real problems are coming out because you're engaging with them. It's not a chalk and talk. I've got 45 slides to get through this morning. Tick, 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 job done, go to lunch. There's a subject matter and often there's no slides. And we're now just talking about stuff and that experiences of actually we learn off each other and go, oh, I didn't know we did it in the organisation. I work for the same organisation as you and I didn't know we could do that. I didn't even know we had that thing on our, an app or a thing within our computer systems that we could use, and whether it's AI or information, it's just not being shared because we've got it, we use it or I use it, but other teams don't even know it happens.
And again, I think that's a great point, JP. I think Nick alluded to our roles often being facilitators of conversations rather than actually training and imparting. And I think you've just hit the nail on the head there. And that's about reading the room, isn't it? Reading the kind of conversations that are going on and acting as that facilitator to draw those things out.
And you have training teams from within organisations who might sit at the back of the room and watch it. And they go, no, you didn't stick to the program. I said, well, no, but we've covered a lot more than what's actually written on the program. And the feedback is we haven't used any slides. And look at the information on the flip charts or the conversations we've had or the action points each person has taken. We are facilitating. We're facilitating what the room want, not what the trainers think they want, or the training team, as in the L&D teams.
I think that's the difference for me. That is the difference between facilitators and trainers. Everyone who works for you, everyone I know works for you, and you yourself, we are not, you could parachute anybody from your team into a room without any prep and say, work with these managers and do something productive with them. And the difference between that and a trainer, and I've been a corporate trainer, so in my early days, I'd learn a subject, assertiveness, and I'd do a course on it. But I couldn't facilitate learning around that. The fly myself without an aeroplane. It was A, B, and C, cover A, B, and C. If you got A, B, and C, yes, tick, off you go. So we've all done it. We've all had to build it up. But these days, I don't have scripts. I don't have, words or even auto cues or cue cards. I don't need them. It's all there. But it's mainly based on the experience we've all had in real. I think one of the things that's different about your team, and this is true of everyone I've met in your teams, we've all had real jobs before we've become trainers. With me, it was sales and marketing mainly, but everyone else has had different avenues into before they became part of the learning development world. And I'm not saying that's requisite for being a great learning development person. There are plenty of people I've met who've been in all their lives and are brilliant. But I do think it gives you that additional ability. Like John said before, I can go into a room not knowing anything about what people do and start talking about the issues they have about managing people or communicating with people, because we've all been there and done it in very different ways in different organizations. So I think there's a quality area. Part of the issue of delivering L&D is who's delivering it. Are they delivering a package and that's all they know, and so it's not their fault if that's what they're asked to do, or are they being given access to a group of people and asked to progress those people forwards in some way so they can do something useful? There's a huge difference between those two, and unfortunately I think there's still too much of the vanilla stuff going on, the chalk and talk, the two-dimensional stuff, and not enough of the transformative experiential kind of learning that really pays dividends and gives results.
So that's a really interesting point, and I guess I agree with what you're saying there. The credibility of your facilitator, the credibility of the person in front of you as an audience, a group of delegates, is so crucial to make sure that you get the L&D right. So is that something that organizations need to think more seriously about in terms of the kind of experience or the life experience of an individual, or is that just us three old men just kind of looking for further careers after age 50?
Well, no, I've done it at PPD. When I joined PPD, I was the only L&D person in a business of 15,000 people. I was supporting them globally, and I knew I couldn't do that myself. And you were part of this process, so I decided rather rashly to create 300 kind of part-time trainers from people who are out there. Now, I was told they're too busy, they're clinical research associates, they're clinical managers, they're this, that, and the other. They've got busy jobs, they can't do this. But I ignored all that. And then the next thing they said was, well, who's suitable for the role? This is an interesting discussion. So because it was a science company, I got lots of ideas about criteria for good trainers, how long they should have been in the company and all this kind of stuff. I said, no, I just want people who want to do it. That's the only thing. I said, it doesn't matter how old they are, how young they are, how much experience they've got, how qualified, it doesn't matter. Just, I want people who want to do it. And if they want to do it, then I'll work with those people. Fortunately, we found approximately about 8 people per office around the world who there were managers and ordinary individual contributors. And they were brilliant because they fit in. You supplied me with some brilliant training modules, which were deliberately 30, 45, 1 hour maximum, 35 minutes, 30, 45 minutes long. And they integrated those with the team meetings. I did the 2 days training with them, and off they went. So for me, that proves the skill set of helping people to learn is available to anyone after a couple of days. Okay, you have to then hone it and develop it. But for me, the most important thing always for me has been the most important thing. When I learn best is when I've got an enthusiastic person in front of me. And if they get the odd thing wrong, sort of technically, I'm not really concerned about that. If I feel they're there to help me, I'm all in. So that's what I found with people out there. And these were a broad range of like I say, finance, marketing, a lot of scientists, a lot of clinical research people, and they did a brilliant job. And so for me, the most critical ingredient for people internally looking at learning people who are delivering learning, you don't have to have a full-time team. You can do it with part-timers brilliantly. And in fact, they integrate. Then you mentioned 70-20-10. Well, that was basically delivering 70-20-10. They had a 2-hour team meeting. They had a 30-minute session on whatever, time management, whatever it was, and everyone was happy. I think there's a lot to be done there for companies, but because it's so against the routine way of doing things, it takes quite a bit of trust. I was lucky. My director employed me, trusted me, and just said, get out there, go get off for 2 years, go around the world and do it. I was very lucky to have you support me with those materials, which were basically drop and go. So I didn't train anyone on any technical areas. I just provided them with the facilitation skills. You provided them with time management, communication skills, all that sort of stuff. And I threw it out there with very little prep, and they just got on with it. It was brilliant.
But I also
Great.
think, Nick, that when you're talking about some of the things around how L&D in organisations approach stuff, is sometimes the only way they've seen training delivered is chalk and talk.
Yeah.
And therefore, that's the only thing they think there is. So until they see a 2J's event, or they see a process of facilitation and kind of engaging with everybody, and they can't hide and sit behind there and swinging on their phones because they're too busy standing up and doing flip charts and getting involved in bits of activity and doing stuff. That actually, then they see everyone engaged. And I remember doing those last sessions we did where we had all those case studies to go through, and we kind of got a bit of not role play, but kind of, they were sitting through a case study, and the lady that had written them all was basically saying we didn't do all of them. It was very disgusted, the fact that I'd only covered 2 or 3 of them, but the 2 or 3, the way we covered them, brought the facilitation afterwards brought out so much more that there's no point in doing them all and just dipping them. The facilitation came out of it, and the discussion was there. And she's going, well, but I've written all these. I've written 6, and we meant to do them.
Yeah, I recall that conversation, and like you say, it's more of a focus there for them on the process. Okay, we've got these 6 courses or 6 scenarios to go through, so we've got to do them. Rather than you rightly say, recognizing and reading the room that if they've got the key learning after scenario 1, what's the point of going through 5 other scenarios, flogging the kind of dead horses of the situation?
Sometimes we did it rather than all 6 being done at the same time, get everyone doing the same one and see what the different results were, to say, actually, we're all going to manage that same situation in a different way. You can hold an apple up to a room and someone will go juicy, crunchy apple. Someone will say cider. Someone will say phone. Someone will say product. Everyone sees whatever we look at in a different way. And then that's about learning styles. That's about actually how are you going to engage with your teams? Because not everyone wants to be engaged with the same way, and even the same person need to be engaged with in a different way on a different day.
I think, again, that's about the strength of the facilitator, is it not, in terms of being able to control that process rather than having a set script or a set kind of detail to deliver. You've got to have almost credibility, as we mentioned before, strength of character to know what is best for your audience and ensure you deliver that. So I think if we're kind of looking to kind of conclude this conversation, I guess, a little bit, if we were looking to kind of advise any companies that are out there scratching their heads as to why their L&D isn't working, it's not landing as they're expecting it to, aside from having great facilitators that can actually deliver your material, what would you say, what would be your top 3 pieces of advice to an organization just to make sure that their L&D does deliver that return on investment, does do what they want it to do?
I think the outcomes is the key. So what are you trying to do with this? What do you want people to do afterwards? That's the key question. Something you alluded to earlier in terms of follow-up. Now, ideally, where I've had programs where people have had a bit of learning module and then they've had coaching, it's been the best result. We all know that. But a lot of organizations can't afford extra coaching, or they haven't got the internal coaches. So a good proxy for that, and this is cheap or free, and I do this, I certainly promote it on anything I do, and those who follow it get better benefits from it. One simple thing you can do is set up a WhatsApp group or a closed Facebook group with the delegates who are on the program. And if it's a big program, all the delegates join as they go through it, so they can talk to each other, because the moment of truth, when they want to do something new they've never done before, they need access to someone they can talk to. Now, if they can't talk to a coach, the best person to talk to would be another manager or another person at their level who's been through the process, just to check in. Frank, you were on that program with me. When we covered this, and we went for, I'm going to do this tomorrow. This is what I'm thinking to do. What do you think? That's all you need. And it transforms most programs from possibly successful, should be successful, to, people are actually having a good time and doing it. So those are the two things: the beginning, the outcome, and then the follow-up. If there's no follow-up, it's not going to fail. It's just people will struggle, and they might not apply the skills, not because they can't, but because they just haven't got that little bit of helping hand when they need it.
Perfect. Great. Thanks for that, Nick. JP, anything else to add?
No, I think the same points. I think, understanding the role of feedback, both from the delegate on the program and to the facilitator, but also L&D getting some feedback from the facilitator on the group, and potentially, what's understood from the conversations you had, to then try to help them develop some of the training going forward. So you don't get someone back in 6 months going, "Oh yeah, I've done this personality trait stuff, and I've done communication, and I've done being assertive, and I've done managing difficult people. I did it online, and then okay. So what do you need next? So how do you manage a meeting? How do you manage a potential situation?" And all that robust feedback going back to L&D from what the facilitator hears in the classroom, because often those delegates will not give it to their own L&D.
Yeah, very true, very true. And again, all great points there. And I think we could have this conversation over and over again, but I think there's still a lot of organisations that do need to sit up and listen and kind of make sure that they are getting as much bang for their buck when they're kind of engaging L&D processes, both internally and externally. And some of the things that you pointed out there are such quick wins and easy to do, but it's surprising how many organisations still make those mistakes. That's great insight, guys. Thank you very much for your time. Much appreciated.
Pleasure.
Thanks very much. And hopefully that lots of organisations will be listening to this and taking those points on board. Hope to see you again, guys, on future episodes. But for the time being, thanks very much.
Thanks, Lee. Thanks, John.